Codex is Introduction to the Lighthouse. Once, the lighthouse was a place of learning, with tools to study the secret workings of great magic. When Solus rebelled against those who call themselves our gods, the lighthouse became his center of operations, with tools to study the best ways to free ourselves from the tyranny of the Evaners. Um, you are safe here, both those of flesh and those of fade. Any who wish to help are welcome. The magic of the lighthouse will provide for your needs, see to your comfort, and even help you understand different tongues. For those who escaped here from distant parts of the Empire. Should you have any other needs, ask for the slow arrow and I will help. Phalasson. A letter dated 6 months ago. Watcher Ingelva. Thank you for the latest dispatch concerning your venture with Master Veilguard. Given that you've spent much of your life in the Grand Necropolis, traveling further north must be a stimulating prospect, and you will be relieved, no doubt, to hear that the crypts have been silent since your departure. Some of the other watchers continue to censure your methods during the War of the Banners, but I will work to ensure that they reconsider while you are away. Master Tethys' claims that this Solas is an elven god bear witnessing, even if Solas is merely a renegade mage using spirits for dire purposes. That alone is call for a watcher to oppose him. Vorgoth and I wish you fine luck on your journey. Remember, even outside Navarra, the dead are ever ready with the supernal aid. Watcher Myrna, keeper of the seals. Interesting. Okay. World of Thetis. Oh, shoot. There's a lot. Let's do it. The Anderfels. The Anderfels are a land of shocking extremes. It is the most desolate place in all the world, for two blights have left great expanses of the steppes so completely devoid of life that corpses cannot even decay there. No insect or grub will ever reach them. It is a land filled with wonders like the Murdain, with its gigantic white statue of Our Lady carved into its face, her hands outstretched and bearing an eternal flame. Or Wysapt Fortress, with its walls of living rock towering over the desolate plains below. The Anders, too, are a people of extremes, the most devout priests and the most deadly soldiers, the poorest nation in the world and the most feared. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genitivi. Andraste, bride of the Maker. There was once a tiny fishing village on the waking sea that was set upon by the Deventer Imperium, which enslaved the villagers to be sold in the markets of Minrathis, leaving behind only the old and the infirm. One of the captives was the child Andraste. She was raised in slavery in a foreign land. She escaped, then made the long and treacherous journey back to her homeland alone. She rose from nothing to be the wife of an Alamari warlord. Each day, she sang to the gods, asking them to help her people who remained slaves in Deventer. The false gods of the mountains and the winds did not answer her, but the true God did. The Maker spoke. He showed her all the works of his hands, the Fade, the world, and all the creatures therein. He showed her how men had forgotten him, lavishing devotion upon mute idols and demons, and how he had left them to their fate. But her voice had reached him, and so captivated him that he offered her a place at his side, that she might rule all of creation. But Andraste would not forsake her people. She begged the Maker to return, to save his children from the cruelty of the Imperium. Reluctantly, the Maker agreed to give man another chance. And so, Andraste went back to her husband, Maferath, and told him all that the Maker had revealed to her. Together, they rallied the Alamari and marched forth against the mage lords of the Imperium, and the Maker was with them. The Maker's sword was creation itself, fire and flood, famine and earthquake. Everywhere they went, Andraste sang to the people of the Maker, and they heard her. The ranks of Andraste's followers grew, until they were a vast tide washing over the Imperium. And when Maferath saw that the people loved Andraste and not him, a worm grew within his heart, gnawing upon it. At last, the armies of Andraste and Maferath stood beyond the very gates of Minrathis, but Andraste was not with them, for Maferath had schemed in secret to hand Andraste over to the Devinter. For this, the Archon would give Maferath all the lands to the south of the Waking Sea. And so, before all the armies of the Alamari and of Devinter, Andraste was tied to a stake and burned, while her earthly husband turned his armies aside and did nothing, for his heart had been devoured. But as he watched the pyre, the Archon softened. He took pity on Andraste and drew his sword and granted her the mercy of a quick death. The Maker wept for his beloved, cursed Maferath, cursed mankind for their betrayal, and turned once again from creation, taking only Andraste with him. And Our Lady sits still at his side, where she still urges him to take pity on his children. From the sermons of Justinian II. Antiva. In the rest of the civilized world, it is common belief that Antiva has no king. I assure you, gentle readers, that this is untrue. The line of kings in Antiva has remained unbroken for 2,500 years. It is simply that nobody pays any attention to them whatsoever. In truth, the nation is ruled by a collection of merchant princes. They are not princes in the literal sense, but heads of banks, trading companies, and vineyards. Their power is conferred strictly by wealth. But Antiva is not primarily renowned for its peculiar form of government, nor for its admittedly unparalleled wines. Antiva is known for the House of Crows. Since Antivans are well known for being good at everything but fighting, it is more than a little ironic that Antiva possesses the most deadly assassins in the world. Their fame is such that Antiva keeps no standing army. No king is willing to order his troops to assault her borders, and no general is mad enough to lead such an invasion. The attacks would likely succeed, but its leaders would not see the day. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genitivi. Oh, this will be long. Buckle up, is the saying. Our Lathan, Part 1. Before the ages were named or numbered, our people were glorious and eternal and ever-changing. Like the great oak tree, they were constant in their traditions, strong in their roots, and ever-reaching for the sky. They felt no need to rush when life was endless. They worshipped their gods for months at a time. Decisions came after decades of debate, and an introduction could last for years. From time to time, our ancestors would drift into centuries-long slumber, but this was not death, for we know they wandered the fade in dreams. In those ages, our people called all the land El Venen, which in the old language means place of our people. And at the center of the world stood the great city of Arlathan, a place of knowledge and debate, where the best of the ancient elves would go to trade knowledge, greet old friends, and settle disputes that had gone on for millennia. But while our ancestors were caught up in the forever cycle of ages, drifting through life at what we today would consider an intolerable pace, the world outside the lush forests and ancient trees was changing. The humans first arrived from Parvalan to the north, called Shemlin or Quicklings, by the ancients. The humans were pitiful creatures whose lives blinked by in an instant. When they first met the elves, the humans were brash and warlike, quick to anger and quicker to fight, with no patience for the unhurried pace of elven diplomacy. But the humans brought worse things than war with them. Our ancestors proved susceptible to human diseases, and for the first time in history, elves died of natural causes. What's more, those elves who spent time bartering, negotiating with humans, found themselves aging, tainted by the humans' brash and impatient lives. Many believe that the ancient gods had judged them unworthy of their long lives and cast them down among the quicklings. Our ancestors came to look upon the humans as parasites, which I understand is similar to the way the humans see our people in the cities. The ancient elves immediately moved to close Elvenon off from the humans, for fear that this quickening effect would crumble the civilization. From The Fall of Arlathan, as told by Gisharel, keeper of the Ralpharan clan of the Dalish Elves. Whew! Alright, next. Arlathan, Part 2. You ask what happened to Arlathan? Sadly, we do not know. Even those of us who keep the ancient lore have no record of what truly happened. What we have are accounts of the days before the fall and a fable of the whims of the gods. The human world was changing even as the elves slept. Clans and tribes gave way to a powerful empire called Tevinter, which, and for what reasons we do not know, moved to conquer Elvenham. When they breached the great city of Arlathan, our people, fearful of disease and loss of immortality, chose to flee rather than fight. With magic, demons, and even dragons at the behest, the Tevinter Imperium marched easily through Arlathan, destroying homes and galleries and amphitheaters that had stood for ages. Our people were corralled as slaves, and human contact quickened their veins until every captured elf turned mortal. The elves called to their ancient gods, but there was no answer. As to why the gods didn't answer, our people left only a legend. They say that Fen'Haral, the dread wolf and lord of tricksters, approached the ancient gods of good and evil and proposed a truce. The gods of good would remove themselves to heaven, and the lords of evil would exile themselves to the abyss. Neither group would ever again to enter the other's lands, but the gods did not know that Fen'Haral had planned to betray them. And by the time they realized the dread wolf's treachery, they were sealed in their respective realms, never again to interact with the mortal realm. It is a fable, to be sure, but those elves who traveled beyond claim that Fen'Haral still roams the world of dreams, keeping watch over the gods, lest they escape from their prisons. Whatever the case, Arlathan had fallen to the very humans our people had once considered mere pests. It is said that the Tevinter magisters used their great destructive power to force the very ground to swallow Arlathan whole, destroying eons or aeons of collected knowledge, culture, and art, the whole of elven lore left only to memory. From The Fall of Arlathan, as told by Gisharel, keeper of the Ralpharan clan of the Dalish Elves. Beyond the veil, spirits and demons. It is challenging enough for the casual observer to tell the difference between the Fade and the creatures that live within it, let alone between one type of spirit and another. In truth, there is little that distinguishes them, even for the most astute mages. Since spirits are not physical entities and are therefore not restricted to recognizable forms, or even having form at all, one can never tell for certain what is alive and what is merely part of the scenery. It is therefore advisable for the inexperienced researcher to greet all objects he encounters. Typically, we must use the term spirit to refer only to the benign, or at least less malevolent, creatures of the Fade. But in truth, all the denizens of the realm beyond the veil are spirits. As the chant of light notes, everything within the Fade is a mimicry of our world. A poor imitation, for the spirits do not remotely understand what they are copying. It is no surprise that much of the Fade appears like a manuscript translated from Tevinter into Orlesian. and back again by drunken initiates. In general, spirits are not complex, or rather, they are not complex as we understand such things. Each one seizes upon a single facet of human experience: rage, hunger, compassion, hope, etc. This one idea becomes their identity. We classify as demons those spirits who identify themselves with dark human emotions and ideas. The most common and weakest form of demon one encounters in the Fade is the rage demon. They are much like perpetually boiling kettles, for they exist only to vent hatred, but rarely have an object to hate. Somewhat above these are the hunger demons, for do little but eat or attempt to eat everything they encounter, including other demons. This is rarely successful. Then there are the sloth demons. These are the first intelligent creatures one typically finds in the Fade. They are dangerous only on those rare occasions that they can be induced to get up and do harm. Desire demons are more clever and far more powerful, using all forms of bribery to induce mortals into the realms. Wealth, love, vengeance, whatever lies closest to your heart. The most powerful demons yet encountered are the pride demons, perhaps because they, among all their kind, most resemble men. From beyond the veil, spirits and demons by enchanter Midramel. The crows and Queen Madrigal. The first crow refused to speak, even when we put hot coals to the soles of his feet and peeled the skin off his face and hands with a paring knife. He opted instead to chew through his own tongue and choke to death on the blood. The second captive repeated what we already knew. Queen Madrigal went on a hunt and did not appear for the evening's festivities. Her body was later found with 4 steel swords through the chest. I asked what he knew about one of the 4 swords being a replica of Hassarian's Sword of Mercy. He had not heard about that, or at least claimed as much. He later died on the rack, smiling slightly. The third crow must have realized he would not leave the dungeon alive. He seemed to hope that by angering Master Fiore, he would earn himself a quick death. The crow tried our patience with pithy comments while Master Fiore was trying to work. At one point, he made a remark about Fiore's mother, which I shall not repeat here. I will admit to feeling admiration for his ability to retain a capacity for coherent speech, and even some wit, while under extreme duress. Amid all his useless chatter, this third crow did raise an important point. His guild has a reputation to uphold. They are ruthless, efficient, and discreet. How would they maintain such notoriety if agents routinely revealed the names of employers with something as banal as torture? This gave me pause. I called for a halt to the session. After some thought, I stabbed the man through the heart and set the 4th and 5th crow captives free. If there is a confession to be extracted, it will not be done with pain. I recommend we abandon this course of action. A report by Captain Aristide, tasked with investigating the assassination of Queen Madrigal of Antiba. Whoa. Whew. Alright. The Dalish Elves. I took the road north from Valroyo toward Navarra with a merchant caravan. A scant 2 days past the Orlesian border, we were beset by bandits. They struck without warning from the cover of the trees, hammering our wagons with arrows, killing most of the caravan guards instantly. The few who survived the arrow storm drew their blades and charged into the trees after our attackers. We heard screams muffled by the forest, and then nothing more of those men. After a long silence, the bandits appeared. Elves, covered in tattoos and dressed in hides. They looted all the supplies and valuables they could carry from the merchants and disappeared back into the trees. These, I was informed later, were the Dalish, the wild elves who lurk in the wilderness on the fringes of settled lands, preying upon travelers and isolated farmers. These wild elves had reverted to the worship of their false gods and are rumored to practice their own form of magic, rejecting all human society. From A Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by Brother Genedivi. The Deep Roads. There isn't a dwarf alive who remembers the deep roads as they once were. They were the network of tunnels that joined the Thaigs together. To be interested, it isn't even right to give them such a simple term as tunnels. They are works of art, with centuries of planning demonstrated in the geometry of their walls, with the statues of the paragons that watched over travelers, with the flow of lava that keeps the deep roads lit and warm. The cloud gazers up on the surface talk of the imperial highway built by the managers of old, a raised walkway that crossed thousands of miles, something that could only have been built by magic. Perhaps it is comparable to the deep roads, although we dwarves didn't need magic. I suppose it doesn't matter anymore. The Darkspawn rule the deep roads now. When Orzammar sealed off the entrances to the deep roads, abandoning everything that lay out there, we handed over the kingdom that was to those black bastards forever. To think that there were Genlocks, that to think that there are Genlocks crawling Bonamar now, tearing down our statues and defiling our greatest works. Corruption covers everything we built out there. Every dwarf who goes out and comes back says it gets worse with each passing year. The foulness spread a little further. And the cloud gazers think the darkspawn are gone just because they aren't spilling out onto the surface? Huh. One day, when Orzammar is gone for good, they'll find out differently. Those darkspawn won't have anywhere else to go but up, and they'll do it. The surface folk will have themselves a blight that will never end. Transcript of a conversation with a member of the Dwarven Mining Cast. 890 blessed. The Fade. The study of the Fade is as old as humankind. For so long as men have dreamed, we have walked its twisting paths, sometimes catching a glimpse of the city at its heart. Always as close as our own thoughts, but impossibly separated from our world. The Devinter Imperium once spent vast fortunes of gold, lyrium, and human slaves in an effort to map the terrain of the Fade, an ultimately futile endeavor. Although portions of it belong to powerful spirits, all of the Fade is in constant flux. The Imperium succeeded in finding the disparate and ever-shifting realms of a dozen demon lords, as well as cataloging a few hundred types of spirits before they were forced to abandon the project. The relationship of dreamers to the Fade is complex. Even when entering the Fade through the use of lyrium, mortals are not able to control or affect it. The spirits who dwell there, however, can, and as the Tarantry teaches us, the great flaw of the spirits is that they have neither imagination nor ambition. They create what they see through their sleeping visitors, building elaborate copies of our cities, people, and events, which, like the reflections in a mirror, ultimately lack context or life of their own. Even the most powerful demons merely plagiarize the worst thoughts and fears of mortals, and build their realms with no other ambition than to taste life. From Tranquility and the Role of the Fade in Human Culture by First Enchanter Josephus. Fen'Haral, the Dread Wolf. There is precious little we know about Fen'Haral, for they say he did not care for our people. Elgar'nan and Mythal created the world as we know it, Andral taught us the ways of the hunter, Salaise and June gave us fire and crafting, but Fen'Haral kept to himself and plotted the betrayal of all the gods. And after the destruction of our Lathan, when the gods could no longer hear our prayers, it is said that Fen'Haral spent centuries in a far corner of the earth, giggling madly and hugging himself in glee. The legends say that before the fall of our Lathan, the gods we know and revere fought an endless war with others of their kind. There is not a Haren among us who remembers these others. Only in dreams do we hear whispered the names of Geldwar and Duarenthal and Anaris, for they are the forgotten ones, and the gods of terror and malice, spite and pestilence. In ancient times, only Fen'Haral could walk without fear among both our gods and the Forgotten Ones, for although he is kin to the gods of the people, the Forgotten Ones knew of his cunning ways, and saw him as one of their own. And that is how Fen'Haral tricked them. Our gods saw him as brother, and they trusted him when he said that they must keep to the heavens while he arranged a truce. And the Forgotten Ones trusted him also when he said he would arrange for the defeat of our gods, if only the Forgotten Ones would return to the abyss for a time. They trusted Fen'Haral, and they were all of them betrayed, and Fen'Haral sealed them away so they could never walk among the people. From the tale of Fen'Haral's triumph, as told by Gisharal, keeper of the Ralafaran clan of the Daily Shelves. Ferelden culture. The Fereldans are a puzzle. As a people, they are one bad day away from reverting to barbarism. They repelled invasions from Tevinter during the height of the Imperium with nothing but dogs and their own obstinate disposition. They are the coarse, willful, dirty, disorganized people who somehow gave rise to our prophet, ushered in an era of enlightenment, and toppled the greatest empire in history. There are few things you can assume safely in dealing with these people. First, they value loyalty above all things, beyond wealth, beyond reason. Second, although although they have nothing in their entire country which you are likely to think at all remarkable, they are extremely proud of their accomplishments. Third, if you insult their dogs, they are likely to declare war. And finally, the surest sign that you have underestimated the Ferelden's is that you think you can come to understand them. Empress Celine the First of Orlais, in her letter to her newly appointed ambassador to Denerim, that should have been in a Frenchish accent, actually. Oh well. The Grey Wardens. The Blight had ravaged the land for months. The armies of the great kings amassed for one last stand. As the sun burst through the clouds that boiled and churned in the dark sky, it illuminated a vast, seething horde of darkspawn with the archdemon at its head. It was then, when courage seemed to fail and all lost to death and despair, that the Grey Wardens came. They arrived with the beating of wings, like mighty war drums, and stood before the armies of men. The Grey Wardens, grim and fearless, marched forth, ever between men and the encroaching darkspawn. They formed a shield of their own bodies and held the line until the dark archdemon was dead and the last darkspawn lay trampled in the dirt. Then, demanding neither reward nor recognition for their sacrifice, the Grey Wardens departed. When the clouds rolled back and the sun shone full upon the blighted ground, the great kings knew that they had lost no men, that none of the blood had been spilled. This is a tale about no battle the Grey Wardens have fought, and yet about them at all. They have always defended us from the Darkspawn, taking losses so we do not have to. Adaptation of a Grey Warden legend. The tale outlined above is widely told, although subject to regional variations. Free marchers might substitute great kings for titles bestowed on their given city-states. In Ferelden, the implied army of wardens is sometimes replaced with two representatives of the national heroes who fought and defeated the Archdemon at Denerim during the Fifth Blight. The beating of wings is a reference to the griffins of the wardens are said to have ridden into battle. Although griffins went extinct long before the recent blight, they still appear in numerous stories, sometimes serving as a metaphor for the warden's unrestrained courage, but also employed to please an eager audience. From Tales of the Wardens by Sister Manon. Majestic bastards. I remember the second last one. I wouldn't get closer than 60 feet, double the wingspan. That left you time to move. The beast was too weak to do much, still seemed respectful to keep the distance and leave its animal and trainer. She starved out, not the way they should go, and not the way I was used to seeing them. Oh, they were majestic bastards, and they knew it. Ask any warden dumped arse over ears for not picking nits. See, trainer and beast had a kinship, and both knew what they wanted. For Griffin, that bond meant grooming. Couldn't fault them. They needed what they needed. I mean, what's fair trade for a saddling warden commander? Full plate, lightning storm, sheer dive straight through an archdemon's wing. Legendary, you can't argue. But back on the ground, they knew they were owed, and you couldn't shortcut and douse them. They had all the majesty of a paddling rat if you waterlogged the feathers. No, it was a grueling task of training 30 bloody feet of wing, and you'd better remember, or maybe the thing got pissy next flight and cut an oak too close. Give you a love tap so hard your next helm dented. Still, everything in balance, every talon tipped. There was nothing that compared. You could reach down from the sky and cradle Thetis in your hand. Anyway, yes, I remember the second last one. After she dropped the robes, took some cross cuts because they do things like that, and then we burned it, and then I got drunk. I do not remember the very last, and you can't make me. Comments of an unnamed Grey Warden. Excerpted from Wycept records of the extinction of treasured species liberated for public consideration by Philium a Bard. Whoo-wee! The Imperial Chantry. There are those who would tell you that the Chantry is the same everywhere as it is here, that the divine and Val Royale reign supreme in the eyes of the Maker, and that this fact is unquestioned throughout Thedas. Do not believe it. The Maker's second commandment, magic must serve man, not rule over him, never held the same meaning within the ancient Tevinter Imperium as it did elsewhere. The Chantry there interpreted the ruling as meaning that mages should never control the minds of other men, and that otherwise their magic should benefit the rulers of men as much as possible. When the clerics of Tevinter altered the Chant of Light to reflect this interpretation of the commandment, the Divine and Val Royale ordered the clerics to revert to the original chant. They refused, claiming corruption within Val Royale, an argument that grew until in 387 Towers, the Chantry and Tevinter elected its own, quote, legitimate and uncorrupted, unquote, Divine Val, who was not only male, but happened to be one of the most prominent members of the Tevinter Circle Magi. This, quote, black divine, unquote, was reviled outside of Tevinter. His existence an offense to the Chantry and Val Royale. After 4 exalted marches to dislodge these rebels, quote unquote, all that the Chantry and Val Royale accomplished was to cement the separation. While most aspects of the Imperial Chantry's teaching show the same, prohibitions against magic have been weakened, and male priests have become more prevalent. The Circle of the Magi today rules Tevinter directly ever since Arcanamaran was elected in 734 Storm, directly from the ranks of the Enchanters to great applause from the public. He dispensed with the old rules forbidding mages from taking part in politics, and within an age the true rulers within the various imperial houses, the mages, took their places openly within the government. The Imperial Divine is now always drawn from the ranks of the First Enchanters and operates as Divine and Grand Enchanter both. This is utter heresy to any member of the Chantry outside of Tevinter. Return to the days of the Magisters, which brought the blights down upon us. But it exists, and even though we have left the Tevinter Imperium to the mercies of the dread Kunari, still they have endured. Further confrontation between the Black Divine and our so-called quote-unquote White Divine is inevitable. From Edicts of the Black Divine by Father David and Kunars, 811 Blessed. Lyrium. Lyrium is the king of metals. Beneath our feet it sings. When properly refined, it is a smooth, slightly iridescent, silvery liquid. In the hands of the dwarf and smith cast, it is mixed with steel to produce indestructible armor and blades that hold an edge for centuries. In the hands of the shaper, it becomes a repository for living memories. And some scholars maintain this as evidence that lyrium is itself alive. It finds its most lucrative its application in the hands of the Formari, who use it in conjunction with baser metals like gold, silverite, iridium, or even iron to produce enchantments. Though mages, of course, consume it in diluted form to bolster their abilities. This is not recommended. Overindulgence in lyrium can have disastrous consequences, particularly in more concentrated amounts. It is not advisable, for instance, that any reader handle raw lyrium, which in many cases can kill on contact. An excerpt from An Alchemical Primer of Metallurgy, Volume 1, by Lord Cerastes of Marnus Pell. The Magisterium. There is a mistaken impression outside the Tevinter Imperium that a magister is simply a mage, and the mere act of being a mage is all that is required to be among the ruling class. A misperception aided, no doubt, by some Tevinter mages claiming the title outside their homeland to take advantage of its reputation. In truth, being a magister requires one hold a seat in the magisterium, the upper house of the Imperial Senate. This is the body that makes laws and which chooses the new archon if there is no approved heir. The Senate's lower house, the Publicanium, consists of elected officials, but it has no true power and is considered a bureaucratic body. Magisters, meanwhile, come from the ranks of the Circle of Magi and the Imperial Chantry, but most hold their seats by virtue of an Archon having granted it to their family long ago. It is not technically required for a Magister to be a mage. Indeed, after the transfiguration that saw the old gods abandoned and Andrastianism embraced, most were not. Since the Tower's age, however, non-mages in the Magisterium have slowly been weeded out. A true Magister is thus a figure of real power and Tevinter. All other mages serve at their pleasure, and any mage not of proper lineage has no influence outside of that which personal wealth and talent provide. From the Ancient North by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. The Maker. There was no word, for heaven or for earth, for sea or sky. All that existed was silence. Then the voice of the Maker rang out, the first word. The Maker. There was no word, for heaven or for earth, for ski. Wow. Okay. The Maker. There was no word, for heaven or for earth, for sea or for sky. All that existed was silence. Then the voice of the Maker rang out, the first word, and his word became all that might be, dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities. And from it made his firstborn, and he said to them, in my image I forge you. To you I give dominion over all that exists. By your will may all things be done. Then, in the center of heaven, he called forth a city with towers of gold, streets with music for cobblestones, and banners which flew without wind. There he dwelled, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. The children of the Maker gathered before his golden throne and sang hymns of praise unending. But their songs were the songs of the cobblestones. They shone with the golden light reflected from the Maker's throne. They held forth the banners that flew on their own. And the voice of the Maker shook the fade, saying, in my image I have wrought my firstborn. You have been given dominion over all that exists. By your will all things are done, yet you do nothing. The realm I have given you is formless, ever-changing. And he knew he had wrought amiss. So the Maker turned from his firstborn, and took from the fade a measure of its living flesh, and placed it apart from the spirits, and spoke to it, saying, here I decree opposition in all things, for earth, sky, for winter, summer, for darkness, light, and my will alone is balanced sundered, and the world given new life. And no longer was it formless, ever-changing, but held fast, immutable, with words for heaven and for earth, sea and sky. And at last did the Maker from the living world make men, immutable, as the substance of the earth, with souls made of dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities. Then the Maker said, to you, my second-born, I grant this gift. In your heart shall burn an unquenchable flame, all-consuming and never satisfied. From the fade I crafted you, and to the fade you shall return, each night in dreams, that you may always remember me. And then the Maker sealed the gates of the Golden City, and there he dwelled, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. Threnodies 5, 1 through 8. Navarra. The fourth time I attempted to cross the border into Navarra from Orlais and was turned back by Chevalier. Yeah, whatever. Chevalier. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna go forward. I decided to take the more roundabout path. A ship back to Ferelden and then another to Navarra. The outcome was more than worth the trouble. The whole country is filled with artistry, from the statues of heroes that litter the streets and even the meanest villages to the glittering golden college of Magi in Cumberland. Perhaps nowhere is more astonishing than the vast necropolis outside Navarra City. Unlike most other followers of Andraste, the Navarrans do not burn their dead. Instead, they carefully preserve the bodies and seal them in elaborate tombs. Some of the wealthiest Navarrans begin construction of their own tombs while quite young, and these become incredible palaces, complete with gardens, bathhouses, and ballrooms, utterly silent, kept only for the dead. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. The Orlesian Empire. There are many lords and ladies in Valroyo, and I mean this literally. Once the system of noble titles in Orlais was labyrinthine. There were barons and baronets. Sorry. There were barons and barons and baronets and sir barons and a horde of others, each with its own origins and its own nuances in comparison. The Orlesian aristocracy is ancient and much given to competition. All the nobility play the grand game, as it is known, whether they wish to or not. It is a game of reputation and patronage, where moves are made with rumors and scandal is the chief weapon. No gentle game, this. More blood has been drawn as a result of the grand game than any war the Orlesians have fought. Of this I am assured by almost every gentleman here. As far as titles went, everything changed with the coming of Emperor Drakon, who established the Orlesian Empire as it exists now and who created the Chantry. There is no more venerated figure in Orlais. In Balrayo, the statue of Drakon stands as tall as the statue of Andraste. Drakon determined that the grand game was tearing Orlais apart, so he abolished all titles besides his own and lord and lady. I am told with some twittering amusement that this action did not end the grand game as Drakon had intended. Now the lords and ladies collected unofficial titles rather than official ones, such as the Exalted Patron of Tassus Clay, or Uncle to the Champion of Trims. It is a headache to remember such titles, and one winches to think of the poor doorman at the balls who must rattle them off as each guest enters the room. The aristocracy is different from Ferelden in other ways as well. The Orlesians' right to rule stems directly from the Maker. There exists neither the concept of rule by merit nor the slightest notion of rebellion. If one is not noble, one aspires to be, or at the least aspires to be in the good graces of a noble, and is ever watching for a way to enter the patronage and those better placed in the grand game. And then there are the masks. And the cosmetics. I have not seen so much paint since the kennels at Highever, but that is another story. From Beyond the Frostbacks by Banterg of West Hill, 920 Dragon. The Kunari. The people of the Kun are, perhaps, the least understood group in Thedas. The Kunari Wars were brutal, but so was the Chantry Schism. So was the fall of the Imperium. Some of this misunderstanding is an accident of nature. The race we call Kunari are formidable. Nature has given them fierce horns and strange eyes, and the ignorant look on them and sea monsters. Some is an accident of language. Few among the Kun's people speak the common tongue, and fewer speak it well. In a culture that strives for mastery, to have only a passable degree of skill is humiliating indeed, and so they often keep quiet among foreigners out of shame. But much of it is the result of the culture itself. The Kunari view their whole society as a single creature, a living entity whose health and well-being is the responsibility of all. Each individual is only a tiny part of the whole, a drop of blood in its veins, important not for itself, but for what it is to the whole creature. Because of this, the Kunari most outsiders meet along to the Because of this, the Kunari most outsiders meet belong to the army, which the Kun regards as if it were the physical body. Arms, legs, eyes, and ears. The things a creature needs in order to interact with the world. One cannot get to know a person solely by studying his hand or his foot, and so one cannot truly meet the Kunari until one has visited their cities. That is where their mind and soul dwell. In Saharan and Parvalin, one can truly see the Qunari in their entirety. There, the unification of the Qunari into a single being is most evident. Workers, whom the Kun calls the mind, produce everything the Qunari require. The soul, the priesthood, seeks a greater understanding of the self and the world and exhorts the body and mind to continually strive for perfection. The body serves as the go-between for the mind, the soul, and the world. Everyone and everything has a place decided by the Kun in which they work for the good of the whole. It is a life of certainty, of equality, if not individuality. From the writings of the seer of Kantar, 841 Blessed. Ravane. Nowhere in my travels, not in the heart of the Imperium nor the streets of Orzammar, have I felt so much an outsider as in Ravane. The chant of light never truly reached the ears of these people. The years they spent under the thumb of the Canaries left most of the country zealous followers of the Kun, but resistance to the chant goes deeper than the Canary War. The Ravani refuse to be parted from their seers, wise women who are in fact hedge mages, communicating with spirits and actually allowing themselves to become possessed. The Chantry prohibition against such magical practices violates millennia of local tradition. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of the Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Sexuality in Thedas. What I find most interesting is that, despite the lack of open discussion on matters of human sexuality, there is commonality to be found on the subject in all Andrastrian lands. Typically, one's sexual habits are considered natural and separate from matters of procreation, and only among the nobility, where procreation involves issues of inheritance and the union of powerful families, is it considered of vital importance. Yet, even there, a noble who has done their duty to the family might be allowed to pursue their own sexual interests without raising eyebrows. The view on indulging lusts with a member of the same gender varies from land to land. In Orlais it is considered a quirk of character and nothing more. In Ferelden it is a matter of scandal if done indiscreetly, but otherwise nothing noteworthy. In Tevinter it is considered selfish and deviant behavior among nobles, but actively encouraged with favored slaves. Nowhere is it forbidden, and sex of any kind is only considered worthy of judgment when taken to awful excess or performed in the public eye. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Surface Dwarves. In Orzammar, dwarven society is divided into rigid castes with houses that compete for power and prestige, but all that is discarded when a dwarf abandons the stone for the surface. Under the open sky, everyone is equal, or so the story goes. The truth is that thousands of years of tradition are not so easily tossed aside. Even though surface dwarves are officially stripped of their caste, many maintain a hierarchy among themselves along the old caste lines. Formerly noble houses are accorded more respect than casteless brands who come up in search of opportunity. The poorest, noble dwarf on the surface looks upon the rich, lower caste dwarves with contempt. Upper class surface dwarf society is roughly divided into two camps. Colonnas, colonnas, who insist on maintaining caste and rank, typically those from the noble or merchant caste families, and ascendants, who believe in leaving Orzammar's traditions underground and embracing life in the sunlit world. Maintaining some tie to Orzammar was seen for generations as the only lifeline for surface dwarves. Bringing surface goods to their kin underground and lyrium and metals to the surface was not only the most lucrative means of making a living, but also a sort of sacred duty, as many surface dwarves willingly accepted exile and the loss of their caste to better serve their house or patron. In recent years, many surface dwarves, particularly ascendants, have branched out. They started banks, mercenary companies, and overland trade caravans. They became investors and speculators in purely surface trade. They became investors and speculators in purely surface trade. These new industries have proven tremendous sources of wealth, but are looked down upon by their more conservative kin. For less affluent surface dwarfs, association with a powerful colonna can open many doors. Dwarves. They can get credit with dwarven merchants, and are often work opportunities by the powerful dwarven merchant guild more readily, sometimes than more qualified but less connected individuals. Seems like regular life. From the Dowager's Field Guide to Good Society by Lady Alcyone. Tevinter Society. To those outside of the Tevinter Imperium, it is easy to imagine society filled with mages and elven slaves and little else. In truth, there are 3 different Tevinters, each of them a world completely separated from the others. There are the mages, the land's nobility, completely obsessed with competing for supremacy with each other, almost to the exclusion of paying any heed to the nation's enemies, such as the Canari. The well-bred Altus sneer at the Latins, who in turn sneer at the Praetari. They vie for the dominance in the magisterium, where factions shift and flow on a daily basis with deadly consequences, requiring every family to put on a veneer of perfect citizenship or face scandal and censure. Then there are the so-called Saperati, the sleepers. These are the non-magical citizens who vastly outnumber the mages, yet are beholden to their whims. Many are resentful of this status, plotting in secret, even as they secretly hope their children will possess magical talent, an enticing lure since the talent could conceivably show up in anyone, even a slave. It would be easy to forget that Tevinter possesses a massive class of publicans, the civil servants, and leaders of the legionnaires. It has an enormous merchant class, enough teeming poor to drown any other nation in Thedas, and the shadowy thieves called presumptor, who are practically treated with respect. And then there are the slaves. One would think they, at least, see each other as equals, but it's not so. The divide between the freed liberati, those who act as personal servants to magisters, those who work on farms and factories, and the servus publicus, who do all of the tasks proper citizens will not, it is all but insurmountable. But perhaps in emulation of those who own them, imperial slaves will connive and scheme to try anyhow. Outsiders might see it as futile, but to Tevinter citizens, their nation's social classes are the most mutable and rewarding a merit in all of Thedas. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Loosen your lips. The Veil. I detest this notion that the veil is some manner of invisible curtain that separates the world of the living from the world of the spirits. Whether it be called the Fade or the Beyond is a matter of racial politics I refuse to indulge in at the moment. There is no this side and that side when it comes to the veil. One cannot think of it as a physical thing or a barrier or even a shimmering wall of holy light. Thank you very much for that image, your perfection. Think of the veil instead as opening one's eyes. Before you opened them, you saw our world as you see it now, static, solid, unchanging. Now that they are open, you see our world as the spirits see it, chaotic, ever-changing, a realm where the imagined and the remembered have as much substance as that which is real. More, in fact. A spirit sees everything as defined by will and memory, and this is why they are so very lost when they cross the veil. In our world, imagination has no substance. Objects exist independently of how we remember them or what emotions we associate with them. Mages alone possess the power to change the world with their minds, and perhaps this forms the nature of a demon's attraction to them. Who can say? Regardless, the act of passing through the veil is much more about changing one's perceptions than a physical transition. The veil is an idea, it is an act of transition itself. It is only the fact that both living beings and spirits find the transition difficult that gives the veil any credence as a physical barrier at all. From A Dissertation on the Fade as a Physical Manifestation by Marino, Senior Enchanter of the Minrathous Circle of Magi, 655, Steel. Vitar. After extensive study of the Canary specimens you kindly provided, I've come to the conclusion that the painted markings on their face and body are not, in fact, solely for ceremonial purpose, but provide a practical benefit. Oh, I'm certain there is some cultural significance to the patterns and colors they choose, but the Canary do nothing without purpose, yes. They call these markings Vitar, which is their tongue means poison armor. It's called this because the markings are magical in nature and actually harden their skin to an iron-like quality without hindering flexibility, and my analysis says the paint consists largely of poison. It's mixed with something else, blood, perhaps their own, and that neutralizes the poison and only for one with Kunari physiology. Anyone else would perish almost instantly, which reminds me, I'll kindly require another body slave. The process activates the magical qualities of the poison, which provides the protective effects, almost in the same manner that lyrium runes do. How this works and whether it can be used for our purposes will require further study, perhaps some live specimens this time. From a letter written by Namiria or Origanus, Oregano, apprentice to Magister Varus, 932 Dragon. Oh. Xenon the Antiquarian. I left the Black Emporium empty-handed for two reasons. First, most of the items were priced far beyond what I could afford. Second, I spent most of my short time there trying to save my curiosity about its proprietor. I found myself stealing glances at the antiquarian from behind piles of books, between shelves, and at one point, over a basket of mismatched shocks. There he sat, petrified in the center of the emporium, skin of waxy gray over ancient taut sinew, moaning in a voice so dry and brittle it sounded like the snapping of twigs after a drought. A girl of not more than 12 scurried to and fro to fulfill his numerous requests. Another patron noticed my fascination and told me that the girl, most likely an urchin rescued from the street, was responsible for the needs of the antiquarian, feeding, washing, and the like. So impossibly old is he, and so fragile his skin, he can only tolerate the barest whisper of touches from the smallest and most tender of his servants. Only in this way may he come close to his lost youth, said the man. I was surrounded by objects of legend, yet none fascinated me as did the antiquarian. From a journal found in Kirkwall's Darktown, written by an unknown author. On to Winter Templars. When one mentions the Templar Order, you no doubt picture the armored members of the Southern Chantry. These Templars are trained to combat uncontrolled magic, blood magic, and abominations with the goal of protecting people, including mages themselves, from the most violent manifestations of magical power. However, they also embody the Southern Chantry's control over mages and enforce many of its strict rules and regulations over magic in general. In addition to combat training, these Templars ingest lyrium. This mineral, usually used by mages for enchantments and rituals, grants Templars the ability to resist and dispel magic. The fact that it is also addictive, chaining them to the Chantry and resulting in paranoia, obsession, and ultimately dementia, is often swept under the rug. Yes, we've heard all about that dirty little secret. As you may have surmised by my use of Southern Chantry, this is not the case in the Tevinter Imperium. In Tevinter, we know that magic can only serve if it is allowed to flourish. We do not suppress talent, we nurture it. That is not to say that we ignore the dangers of magic and what it might allow, those with violent intent if not combated. As in the South, our Templars are trained to prevent the excesses of blood magic and to subdue demons as well as those inflicted by possession. But our Templars do not take lyrium. They do not enforce unnecessary regulations, they are not given power over mages, but follow the lead of our most esteemed magisterium. They serve the Chantry and the people of the Imperium. I must admit, I rather prefer our way of doing things. From a letter written by Lithacia Palace, living in a border town in the Tevinter Imperium, to a cousin on Orlais, 915 Dragon. that's the end of Codex.